Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's Business in 2021 webinar presentation. My name is Kathy Purdy. I'm a marketing manager at Schoeneck King. I'd just like to go over two quick housekeeping items before we get started. If you would enter questions using the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen, we will do our best to address those as time allows. Once the webinar has ended, we would appreciate you taking a moment to complete the brief survey. Your comments and suggestions are important to our panelists to provide us with topics for future presentations. So it is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Andy Bobreck.
Thank you, Kathy. Great to be you. Great to be with everyone on the webinar. We have a tremendous panel today, including some new faces joining us from our other offices. My pleasure to first welcome Sarah Luke. Sarah works down in our New York City office. Sarah and I work together on a variety of issues, and she is particularly focused today on some recent enactments in New York City metro area that I know will impact many of the attendees of this call who either have operations or employees in the New York City area. So Sarah, great to have you with us today. Thanks for joining, and we appreciate.
Great, thanks very much, Andy, and thanks everyone for tuning in with us today. As many of you probably know, last week, Mayor de Blasio announced an emergency executive order 225, creatively named Key to New York City. And the purpose of the order is to incentivize vaccination, to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, and overall to protect the public health. Interestingly, the responsibility for sort of living out those purposes rests on the shoulders of companies in New York City, or that are operated in New York City. And so this applies to indoor entertainment and recreation settings, so theaters, places to go to either see live performances or movies, indoor food services. This applies to restaurants as well as cafeterias. So for our higher education clients, this would apply to you, and indoor gyms and fitness settings. There are some exceptions. I think it's always helpful when thinking about these new compliance initiatives to keep in the back of our mind the public policy that these are meant to help with. So K through 12 schools are exempt, and that makes sense because little children cannot get vaccinated. Another exception is nursing homes and community centers. So those entities are exempt, but as you can imagine, as you're thinking about your own operations, there are a lot of entities that are covered. And so what does this mean? What is the obligation exactly? Well, the obligation is that for anyone that comes into these indoor operations, they have to show both proof of vaccination and proof of identification. So colloquially in the New York City office, we were kind of talking and imagining bouncers at all of the different establishments. Although luckily, as we'll touch on, there are different options. You don't have to necessarily adopt the bouncer approach. So proof of vaccination, there are three ways that patrons or employees can provide proof. There are two apps, one available through New York State, one available through New York City. And you can also use the CDC vaccination record card that most of us are familiar with. And with respect to ID, it's the same kind of government issued ID that we would accept for other purposes. Luckily, for entities that have patrons that are regulars, so think like gym membership, you only have to verify those 2 points of identification and vaccination one time. So if you can keep a roster internally, that's a way to kind of prevent that barrier of access for some of your customers. And as with every kind of blanket rule, there's some exceptions. And these exceptions apply both to employees, there's one group of exceptions, and then to patrons, constituents that our organizations serve. So with respect to employees, this vaccination requirement works just like a workplace vaccination mandate. And so there can be exceptions for people who have a medical reason why they can't be vaccinated or who have a sincerely held religious belief. And there's an accommodations requirement that applies to such employees. With respect to patrons, the duty to accommodate is limited to people who have a disability or medical reason that they cannot provide that proof of vaccination. As you might imagine, this poses somewhat of a challenge. A lot of people have very strong views about vaccination, either, whatever their views are, a lot of people have strong ones. And if you're trying to serve a client or customer base, you don't want to alienate people, right? So you want to comply, and we'll talk about why that's really important apart from the public policy reasons. But you also don't want to alienate your customers. So luckily, there is some guidance, both by the city and by OATH, the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings, regarding how you can offer accommodations to customers in different kinds of settings. So thinking about virtual options, outdoor options, for restaurants, takeout, or an advanced reservation system. So there are some creative ways to think about compliance in these areas. Compliance really is a two-part plan required by the executive order. So first, notification. Now, there is a sign that New York City has created for businesses to use. But you're also going to want to think about whether it makes sense to notify customers or regulars in a different way. This is going to be a change for people. People might want to know what to expect if they want to use your facilities. And you're going to want to think about, given the populations that you serve, what makes sense, if it's helpful for you, if it makes business sense to give advance notice. And the other thing is, you have to adopt a comprehensive plan that shows exactly how you, given your organizational structure and needs, intend to comply with these requirements. The good thing is, enforcement doesn't begin until mid-September, so you have a little bit of time. And I would advise you to really, use that time and think, what kind of plan is going to work the best for our organization? And of course, here at Bond, we do have expertise and could be helpful in that process. It's pretty important to pay attention to this. It's a hot button issue, and there are fines associated with non-compliance. Now, luckily, we are not responsible for ensuring that all forms of ID meet the governmental requirements, but it is important that organizations make a good faith effort to verify as required under the executive order. And there is a mechanism by which you can, if you have concerns that people are showing you IDs or vaccination certifications that are not legit, there is a mechanism by which that can be reported. But the fines can add up, right? So the first violation is $1,000, but if there's repeat violations, then the fines go up. So this is something to pay attention to. Luckily, as I said, enforcement doesn't start until September 13, so there is some time to kind of get the ball rolling and come up with a plan and figure out the notification and potential accommodations that would best serve your organization. So thank you.
Sarah, thanks so much. Two things I wanted to kind of run by you. First, I've worked my way. There's quite a bit of materials and guidance that came out with this EO, and it seemed like some of it could be, while not controlling or guiding, but if you're an entity outside of New York City, let's say, thinking about patrons and concerns with whether patrons are vaccinated, et cetera, that could provide insight to you. Is that a fair point?
I think that that's right. I think that one thing that I think this is done on even a national level is gotten consumers more interested in what is my gym, my restaurant, my place of gathering. What are they doing to protect me? And what is my plan? What is the plan? And are they taking this seriously? Because I see it's serious enough that one city has implemented these regulations.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, thanks. No, that's helpful. And the second I noticed a TikTok video of a young man who got his barcode with his vaccine tattooed on his arm. That's optional. Am I correct? That's optional in New York? No tattoos required?
Yeah, I haven't seen that guidance yet, but that's certainly a level of commitment that I think might be unprecedented.
All right, good. Hey, Sarah, thanks for joining us. Hope you can come back sometime soon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, it's my pleasure to welcome Larry Fennell. Larry works in our New York City office and has been keeping close tabs on a piece of local legislation in New York City with respect to mandatory retirement benefits that private sector employers must provide, as well as counterpart legislation that has been passed through the state legislature thus far, but is still pending. And again, I think we wanted to welcome Larry on to talk about this legislation. And I think it's important to know too, for all employers in New York State, we see this continual back and forth between the city enacting what I think you could fairly call a progressive legislation and the state countering and vice versa. So we think this is something of interest to all our clients here in New York and our guests on this. So Larry, thanks again for joining. Great to have you today.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And greetings from the Garden State today. I think I'm the first bond attorney in New Jersey. I'm Larry Fennell. I'm in the Employee Benefits Department, and I work out of our New York City office and our Red Bank office. So good afternoon, everyone. I'll be speaking about what's being referred to as the Retirement Security for All Act, which recently passed in New York City. In response to concerns that many New Yorkers weren't prepared for retirement or weren't saving enough for retirement, this act was passed to provide a retirement savings opportunity for certain New York City employees who don't have access to a retirement plan through their employer. The act mandates that certain covered employers automatically enroll employees and create for them an IRA and defer funds from payroll to fund these IRA accounts. So we'll be working through this and providing a couple points here and there. This may sound familiar to a lot of employers who have employees in different states. A lot of states and a lot of other cities and municipalities have passed similar laws before, and the similar laws, either may require a particular filing requirement and enrollment of their employees. So if you've found yourself obligated to comply with other states and state laws and other municipal laws, this may come across as familiar. But let's first start with who is covered here. And we're talking about employers who have, in the private sector, with at least 5 employees in New York City. Note, in New York City, not total employees. The employers must be in operation at least 2 years and not be providing an employee benefit retirement plan to their employees. Covered employees we're talking about are working at least 20 hours a week and at least age 21. Irregular duties occurring in New York City. In order to, as part of this program, employers are required to establish IRAs and accounts for their employees, automatically enroll their employees at a 5% of pay deferral level. Employees will be free to adjust this contribution rate as they see fit and potentially opt out if they don't want to participate in the program anymore. Employers will be required to transfer the monies from payroll as soon as possible into those IRA accounts following payrolls. Employees will be able to contribute up to $6,000 a year generally, and employees who are age 50 and over will be allowed to contribute $7,000. Unlike an employer plan, which stays at the employer absent a rollover, plans are thought of to be a little bit more portable and stay with the employee rather than the employer, as they're really just an IRA and the same thing that anyone can really open up with a financial institution. They'll be free to roll over those monies into any account, a different IRA, or if they change jobs and start working for an employer who has an employee plan, they'll be free to roll over those funds into that plan as well, so long as the plan accepts it. Employers do have a minor record keeping requirement here. Have to make sure they keep records to show that they established the account and that they transferred funds to those accounts, and ensure that they protect the confidentiality of the employee and account data involved in this issue. Annually, they're going to have to provide account reports to employees. While there's no guidance as of yet as to, all the record keeping here, it seems reasonable that the financial institutions who will ultimately be carrying these IRAs may ultimately take that, but we will have to await further guidance to determine how the reporting obligation will fall and whether or not it'll be an onus on employers or the financial institution to provide those reports. Any fees associated with this are going to be borne directly by the participant and likely be charged as, from the financial institution, whether it's a charge directly administratively by the institution or whether it's a charge through the investment product. Again, it's a wait and see right now. There are penalties, failure to comply, whether it's failure to enroll employees, failure to timely transfer funds to the IRAs, or failure to retain records. For enrollment and for penalties, you're talking $250 for the initial violation, $500 for a second violation that occurs within 2 years of the first, and then $1,000 for every violation after. So it's a per employee fine, so these can add up. So it's might be mindful of these penalties as you go forward to ensure that you avoid sort of issue there. The record keeping requirements, it's a $100 fine. The legislation was a little bit thin on details there, but of course, in this situation, you always want to avoid fines. So be sure to keep sufficient records to show that the employees are able to, the employee monies are going to these accounts and accounts were established on a timely basis. The entire program to be overseen by 3 mayoral appointees, and the board here, the Retirement Savings Board, has the authority to contract with financial services companies to provide IRAs, administrators to handle the administration of these IRAs, and create processes here to ensure that employees are enrolled in the program, provide education, and do a lot of the different things here that are traditionally associated with a traditional employee retirement plan, a 401k plan. So the board's going to has 2 years to establish guidelines to provide employers with additional details, and hopefully some of that guidance will help kind of fill the gaps in this legislation. As far as next steps are concerned here, there's nothing to do here right now at this time. Right now, as I said earlier, the board has 2 years from August 9th, 2021 to provide details on the program. So we're talking no immediate action here. Some of the other issues here is, what impact are we talking about from other laws? This, by statute, this program was intentionally excluded from the application of ERISA. And I haven't seen something like this in recent memory, but it's found to be subject to ERISA. The entire law will be withdrawn and dissolved. So this program is interesting in that it was strictly intended to be an ERISA program, and as a result, you won't have the traditional requirements that all employers of sponsoring an ERISA plan. In addition, and possibly in anticipation of New York State legislation that is similar to the program that's covering New York City employees, if a statewide program comes up, provides substantially similar elements as the New York City program, and puts the same opportunities to for employee deferrals, this will be discontinued as well. So as I say here at the end of the slide, the New York State legislature already has a program en route. It will be similar in many respects to the New York City program. It will use a 3% automatic enrollment with a 10 employee minimum to participate. And ultimately, it sounds like this New York State program is going to be very similar to the New York City program. So given the fact that this board has 2 years to implement this, and that we have legislation that's gone through, is on the way to the governor at this point, it may very well be this is just a news bite and not anything of substance. But at the very least, in light of the fact that if a New York State program is coming, if you are an employer who has a small workforce in New York State, you're going to have to provide some level of a mandatory automatic enrollment IRA program in lieu of a retirement program that covers your employees, and you'll be, responsible for employee deferrals into that program. So it's wait and see at this point, but ultimately, I think something is on the way, whether it be at the city level or the state level, and it's important to monitor this. We'll be providing additional guidance as this comes forward, and be sure to provide updates. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or any of the bond attorneys here, and we can provide you guidance with respect to that.
Larry, thanks a lot. That's a really cool overview. And I know when I read the news article on this, I said, this kind of caught me off guard for sure, and especially the piece where this had passed the state quietly, right? I mean, this is a notable development that you've got municipal entities and even the state mandating private employers to implement these plans, and I'm sure our clients and friends of the firm will be keen to look at your updates. I'm sure you'll get them posted on the firm's website, and more to follow on this. And I guess it remains to be seen whether our new governor signs the legislation, but assured we'll be keeping tabs on that too for everybody. So Larry, thanks a lot. Appreciate you joining us. I'm sure we'll have you back at some point to comment further on this.
My pleasure, Andrew. Happy to help.
Yeah, and sorry I put you in New York City instead of Jersey at the start here. I should know better than that. Thank you for
I have a thick skin, Andrew, so I won't
gently
take
correcting me on that one. It's great to have you. It's great to have a presence in Jersey too. We're very excited about that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. You bet. All right, Katie, what's going on? How are you?
Everything, lots is going on as always, but I am okay. How about you?
Good. I'm good. Thank you. It's good to have you. I know folks are here with shaking.
That's right. We've always got a lot shaking in Albany. So let's get started where we always get started, with the numbers. So as you can see on this graph, we're seeing a slight, things are starting to look like they're peaking, which is good and very welcome news. This is, again, these are new reported cases in New York State alone. This is not other states. If you look at other states, there may be a peak happening, but Florida's peak is happening, about at the top of the other graph. So they're very different, what's happening in other states. So, but in New York, I wanted to include this data here because I think it's important to take a look at. So last week, we saw that there was an 89% increase in COVID cases from August. That 14-day change last week was 89%. This week, it's 38%. What does that mean? It means that things are tapering off, as we saw on that graph, the prior slide. Things are tapering off. They are still increasing, right? We are in New York, average daily cases of 4,517, but it's slowing down with the rate of increase. This indicates that at some point soon, likely within the next week or two, we're actually going to see things flatten and then start going down. Very welcome news. I think that's welcome news for all of us, that things look like we are potentially going to be heading in the right direction. All of the other statistics are remaining stable as well. You're seeing a decrease in everything, well, it's not a decrease, but it's a slowing rate of change in the number of hospitalizations. We went from 80% to a 40% increase. there's still a significant amount of hospitalizations occurring across the state, but ICU beds generally in New York are available. They are much more open, and in certain areas, they are less open than others, right? If you are in a rural area where there is a high proportion of your population is unvaccinated, those ICU beds are generally more full than it is in an urban area where there are multiple hospital systems to take, the number of patients that are required. So that is all welcome and good news. And also welcome and good news is our vaccination progress. We've seen a 1% increase in all of these numbers over the past week. So 59% of all New Yorkers are fully vaccinated. 66% have received one dose. If you're 18 and older, we're looking at 71% are fully vaccinated and 79% have received one dose, those are great numbers to be looking at. And that will certainly help us with what's happening next. And I have a feeling we'll see those numbers go up even further, given the full FDA approval of the Pfizer biotech vaccine yesterday. So that was announced yesterday, and as we all suspected would occur, there were a raft of new vaccine mandates that came out yesterday. One of them I didn't add to this list, so I will bring it up right now. The New York State court system announced that all employees will need to be vaccinated or subjected to weekly testing if they have a bona fide exemption. Who else is mandated vaccines? The Pentagon. It's very likely that that's coming for all service members. It's still, the official order hasn't come out yet, but it is very likely that all Department of Defense personnel will be vaccinated, fully vaccinated, which includes all service members. The SUNY and CUNY systems, they have announced that there will be mandated vaccines. SUNY, they have 35 days to become fully vaccinated, and CUNY has 45 days to be fully vaccinated. Excuse me. It's hard. Some of these places, it's one shot. You have to get by September, 27th, and then there's other places where you have to be fully vaccinated by a date. So it gets a little tough to speak about it. Looking at New York City schools, they announced that every employee has to receive a shot by September 27th, one shot. In New Jersey, I only added this because I knew that we were going to have Larry, who would be in New Jersey. All state employees have to be vaccinated, and all school employees, that includes public and private school employees, must be fully vaccinated by October 18th or tested weekly. And then we have two companies at the bottom of this list. CVS and Chevron have both announced that there will be vaccine mandates for their employees. So why did I just run through that whole list of these? Because more are about to come. This photo was taken at midnight this morning. This is our new governor, Kathy Hochul. This is her swearing in ceremony, and she is scheduled to speak today at 3 o'clock. So luckily for us, she knew that this webinar was happening, and she said, I'm not going to announce anything major during the 12 o'clock Tuesday slot, like the state has been wont to do for the past 18 months. And let's hope that it continues, where the state doesn't announce major policy decisions right before the Tuesday webinar. But anyways, it's expected that in that address that she's going to give today, there will be lots of it's going to have to do with COVID. And that includes looking at these. These are the questions facing the new administration. Will there be a mask mandate in schools, and will there be a vaccine mandate in schools? The mask mandate, this is the easiest question to answer up front. So that's why I put it first. I would bet, if I were a betting person, I would say that there will be a mask mandate coming for schools. And what about a vaccine mandate? Last week, the now governor, Kathy Hochul, said that she didn't believe that she had the authority to mandate the vaccine for public school employees. She said that would have to be something the legislature would have to give her the power to do. that may have changed now that we have full approval of the Pfizer vaccine, but it may not have changed. So keep your eyes out for that. That one is an open question, but the mask mandate part of it is very likely coming. And I highly doubt that there will be a school opt-in into that or school opt-out. I think it's going to be a statewide mandate. But again, we'll find out today, likely at 3 o'clock. Will there be a state government or a public worker vaccine mandate like New Jersey did? Again, it looks very likely, but if she doesn't believe that she has the authority to do it, then it won't happen. So if she does have the authority to do it, I would not be surprised if that happens. But if she, her and her advisors determine that she doesn't, then, it's not going to happen. Will the HERO Act be activated? This is a question that I put right in here because I knew it would keep all of you on your toes. Yesterday, the authors of the HERO Act set out a press release urging her to direct the Department of Health to categorize COVID-19 as disease worthy of activating the HERO Act. There is going to be a lot of pressure on her to have the HERO Act activated, and I do not think it is outside of the realm of possibility that the HERO Act will be activated. In fact, I would be preparing for it to be activated. But given the fact that we're seeing cases level out, we may be reaching a point where it's not as necessary to enact it as it may have been earlier. So I think they're going to be really studying that data very closely. But again, these are all things that are within the realm of possibility. And then finally, what about the New York eviction moratorium? It is supposed to expire next week. That is something that the legislature would have to come and pass to, extend that eviction moratorium further. But there's really competing interests here. Progressives are urging that this eviction moratorium is expanded beyond next week. And meanwhile, landlords obviously are urging the opposite, that it ends next week. And so that is going to be something to really watch here. Remember, the governor has announced that she will be running for governor next year. And effectively in New York State, that means she has to win the Democratic primary, which is in June of 2022. So she does not even have a full year to really prove herself. She will have to keep this, the Democratic coalition together, which means that she's really going to have to be fighting off progressives that would look to primary her. Something they would likely look to primary her about would be the eviction moratorium. So keep your eyes close on that one. I think that that's going to be a developing topic. Finally, looking at what happened in the past, 2 weeks with the Department of Health and their mandate that hospital and nursing home workers become vaccinated. This order came out very differently than other guidance documents have from the Department of Health. This was issued as an order. It's not a publicly easily accessible document. It was sent to all hospitals and nursing homes. And it's not something that you can easily find online. But what does it say? It says that nursing home and hospital employees must have one shot of the COVID-19 vaccine by September 27th, 2021. Hospitals and nursing homes will likely have to report the number of people vaccinated and the number of people who are using exemptions. Those exemptions are obviously medical and religious exemptions. This is in a state of flux. The announcement from Governor Cuomo was much broader than what this order is. We haven't seen an order come out that is equivalent from the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, OPWDD, regarding congregate care settings. So keep your eyes out for that. In the governor's initial press release, he made it appear as though it would, this vaccine mandate would cover those areas. right now we haven't seen something that indicates that. So this is really in a state of flux. Again, what is difficult here is that a lot of this information is not publicly available or easily accessible on publicly available websites. So again, we will continue to monitor this very closely. I'm sure that there are lots of questions about it. But don't be surprised if we see more vaccine mandates happening next week. I think this is going to be the topic du jour for the next month. Maybe longer, probably a lot longer. Let's be real. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Andy.
Katie, thank you. Appreciate the update. You covered a lot of, I think, really helpful information there. And I think, like everybody, we're eager to see how the local administration takes hold and what's ahead. Stay tuned on all fronts there. We'll be sure to continue to report. So I wanted to just answer, or at least address a few questions that we're seeing come up with some regularity for the benefit of the viewers here. One question that I've gotten is, hey, what's happening when people test positive? What do we do? Are quarantine orders still being issued? And anecdotally, we can tell you, yes, we are seeing county health departments issue those quarantine orders for those who test positive. We are seeing quarantine orders being issued to those who had close and proximate contact with others who test positive, and even where they may test negative or have been inoculated with one of the vaccines. So yes, that is happening. And again, this takes us back to many months ago, where we were seeing the emergence of the disease and such quarantine orders. And you're going to want to look at those orders. If you have employees, staff, others who are subject to the orders, you're going to want to get a copy of those. You're going to want to look at those and keep in mind that can then trigger the potential for paid leave benefits and the alphabet soup that we have in place right now, providing leave in those circumstances for employees here in New York. Another question that we're getting now is some employers are discussing whether or not to mandate vaccination now. Some are seeing the full approval status for the Pfizer vaccine as being a motivating factor that, hey, it's finally been fully approved. Now it's time to mandate it. Again, I don't think it changes materially any of the legal analysis that we've presented or that you may have received beforehand on this subject, but the issue is pressing and we expect it to continue. And if we alternatively allow employees to test, as we're seeing this kind of hybrid arrangement, you either have to be vaccinated or you got to test periodically, maybe weekly, is that time compensable? It's a good question. And it's one that the answer will ultimately depend on the individual facts and circumstances that apply to your workplace and how you're going about this program, how the testing will be conducted, when it will be conducted. Will it be conducted at your place of employment on working time? Will it be offsite by a third party? These are issues that are going to require individualized analysis. You're going to want to get that insight by working with your favorite bond attorney here, by contacting with us, and by consulting with legal counsel if need be. Again, we can help on this issue, but I think it's important data for you to get as and if you are looking to implement this type of program for your workforce. And again, is now the time? Well, we really can't answer that for you. Again, that's going to depend on your own operations, the impact of imposing a mandate on your workforce. What is that going to have from a practical standpoint? And are you comfortable with the ramifications? Again, keeping in mind your obligation to accommodate individuals who have a sincerely held religious belief, a term we're getting very familiar with, as well as qualified individuals with disabilities, and going through the interactive process that you'll need to go through with respect to imposing the vaccine mandate. Another question I'm starting to see, and folks are in the midst of summer travel right now, but there's also travel that is getting planned for the older months ahead here in the Northeast, heading down south, and concerns arising in terms of, can we restrict our employees from traveling to certain areas? You'll remember where we saw these higher infection rate areas, again, months and months ago, this issue came up. And the short answer is probably yes. you can impose these types of restrictions. But you're going to need to be thoughtful and measured and careful about doing this. And there are some potential issues that can arise with respect to these types of requirements. But if you're considering it, it is something you can consider. I encourage you to work with your bond attorney if you're seriously going to implement such a restriction. And then finally, the extension of the Ffcra, again, that was the federal program that, among other things, provided for emergency paid sick leave benefits that were COVID related, as well as emergency FMLA paid leave benefits that were COVID related, in an enumerated listing of categories. Those categories were extended and expanded by legislation earlier, or I guess close to the end of last year in 2020, and are set to expire at the end of the month in September. I did a little bit of digging. I haven't seen anything firm indicating that will be extended. I suppose it's possible, but as of right now, those benefits are set to expire at the end of September. We'll continue to monitor that issue for any developments, and of course report back here. Katie, I don't know, are you hearing or seeing anything on the? I know you've got your ear to the rail in Albany, but are you hearing anything on the Ffcra and extension there legislatively on the national level?
I am not. It's not. I do not believe that it's in the budget that's currently being negotiated. You would assume that if it was going to happen, it would probably be in there. But I wouldn't put it outside of the realm of possibility. It is a tax credit, and it's one of those benefits that's palatable to both sides because it's a tax credit. So
Sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if it does get extended. But right now, because it's such a long time until it expires, it's over 30 days. So of course it's not going to be it's not pressing right now.
Plenty of time for change to happen there. Well, and hopefully if we see a better trend on your graph there, that would obviate the need for it too, which I know we're all hoping for. So thank you to Larry, to Sarah, to Katie. Today you have their contact information there. Again, we bring you the best and brightest that Bond has to offer. So I encourage you to contact them and work with them. Great attorneys all, and ready to help you. Thanks for your continued attendance on this program, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Be well, be safe in the meantime. Thanks.